Hello guys, today as a continuation to the previous class, we'll discuss about the inguinal canal, right? Today's learning objective is to learn about inguinal canal. Inguinal canal is an oblique intermuscular passage, right? Oblique and intermuscular. You have to remember these things. This is oblique and this is intermuscular. That means it runs between the muscles. Passage running parallel and 4 centimeters long, lying above the medial half of the inguinal ligament. So there is so much of information in these two lines, right? It is oblique in direction, intermuscular passage. It is parallel to the inguinal ligament, 4 centimeters long, and it is above the middle half of the inguinal ligament, right? Inguinal canal is a slit-like passage, right, that extends in a downward and medial direction. That is between like this, downward and medial. If this is the median axis, just above and parallel to the lower half of the inguinal ligament. It begins at the deep inguinal ring, right, an oval inguinal region. I'll show you. You see that is the inguinal ligament, right? The right inguinal ligament, right? So this is the medial half, right? This is the medial half of the, this is the lateral half, this is the medial half, right? So in the medial half, there is a gap, superficial ring, deep inguinal ring, a slit-like passage that runs like this is inguinal canal, right? So it has a deep inguinal ring, and the ring is in the fascia transversalis and continues approximately 4 centimeters, ending at the superficial inguinal ring, right? Superficial inguinal ring, a triangular gap in the external oblique aponeurosis. We'll see them. On the surface of the canal is marked by two parallel lines, 1 centimeter apart and 4 centimeters long. On the surface, the canal is marked by two parallel lines just above the medial half of the inguinal ligament. The deep inguinal ring is marked 1.2 centimeters above the mid-inguinal point as an oval opening at the lateral end of the two parallel lines, right? I'll show you. The superficial inguinal ring is marked just above the pubic tubercle as a triangular opening at the middle end of the two parallel lines. The center of the superficial inguinal ring lies 1 centimeter above and lateral to the pubic tubercle. I'll see. So you see, these are the two parallel lines the other is talking about. This is the superficial inguinal ring, and this is the deep inguinal ring, right? It's already here there. And so the deep inguinal ring is 1.2 centimeters away from the mid inguinal point, right, in the transversalis, and superficial inguinal ring is 1 centimeter away from the pubic tubercle, right? So these two parallel lines, right? This is 4 centimeters long. So that is what we have drawn in the earlier section. Coming to the deep inguinal ring. The deep inguinal ring is an opening in the transverse Ehrlich fascia, approximately midway between the anterior superior iliac spine and pubic symphysis, and about 1 centimeter away above the inguinal ligament. We have already seen that it is oval with a roughly vertical long axis. Its size varies between individuals, but usually 1 to 2 centimeters wide in adults and larger in male. Right? It is related about to the arched lower margin of the transversus abdominis, right, and medially to the interfoveolar ligament. So interfoveolar ligament is nothing but the thickening of the some of the muscle fibers of the transversus abdominis, right? If you remember the previous class rightly. So, and the inferior epigastric vessels run in the medial border of the deep inguinal ring. So we'll see that. So you see, this is the transversus abdominis, right? And this is inguinal ligament, right? We need some inferior epigastric vessels. So those are the inferior epigastric vessels, right? Inferior epigastric vessels. So deep inguinal ring is, what we see, the inferior epigastric vessels runs in the medial border of the deep inguinal ring, right? So let us draw. So this is the deep inguinal ring, right? Deep, because the inferior epigastric vessels are medial to the deep inguinal ring. Okay, this is the medial part, right? So this is the anterior part, right? This is how anteriorly, and so the inferior epigastric vessels lies medial to the deep inguinal ring. So deep inguinal ring will be there. The traction of the fascial ring exerted by the contraction of the internal oblique may narrow the opening when intra-abdominal pressure is increased. So when the internal oblique traction pulls the ring, you see, so these are the inferior epigastric vessels, right? This is the inguinal canal and spermatic cord coming out of the inguinal canal. Round ligament in case of females. You see, this is the external oblique and deep inguinal ring. You see how it is coming, the deep inguinal ring here. So this is the inguinal ligament, this is half, right? Medial half, lateral half. So exactly half, 1 centimeter above the mid inguinal point, right? You see, we are this is the view from interior of the abdominal wall. This is the inguinal ring, deep inguinal ring, right? Coming to the superficial inguinal ring, the superficial inguinal ring is the hiatus in the upper nibs of the external oblique, whereas the deep inguinal ring is the transverse Ehrlich fascia, right? But this is the hiatus in the external oblique aponeurosis, just above and lateral to the crest of the pubis. The ring is actually a triangular, which with its apex pointing laterally towards the anterior superior iliac spine. Although it varies in size, it does not usually extend laterally beyond the middle third of the inguinal ligament. The ring is smaller in the female. The base of the triangular opening lies along the crest of the pubis, right? Its sides are lateral and medial crura of the opening of the aponeurosis. So what happens is the fibers that surrounds the superficial inguinal ring is called as crus or crura, right? Lateral crus and medial crus. The lateral crus is stronger and is attached to the pubic tubercle. The medial crus is thinner and its fibers attached to the front of the pubic symphysis and interlace with those of the opposite side. A few intercrural fibers arch above the apex of the superficial inguinal ring, right? So between the medial crest, for example, this is the medial crest fibers, this is the medial crest, this is the lateral crest. Okay, so there are fibers between these two intercrural fibers, right? Some fibers from the external oblique aponeuris and its overlying fascia continue downward from the crura of the ring over the spermatic cord coming out here. Okay, so this crura, this ring over the spermatic cord and form the delicate external spermatic fascia, right? So these fibers, right, fascia and fibers extends beyond the superficial inguinal ring onto the spermatic cord as external spermatic fascia, right? See, this is the spermatic cord, this is the intercrural fibers, superficial inguinal ring, here it is. See, this is the superficial inguinal ring, right? This is the lateral crest, this is the medial crest, intercrural fibers. See, this is the deep inguinal ring, right? And this is the superficial inguinal ring. This one is the superficial inguinal ring. Spermatic cord is coming out of here. You see, if you dissect this aponeurosis, you can clearly see the deep inguinal ring, right? External oblique neurosis, aponeurosis removed, right? And internal oblique also removed. So we can clearly see inguinal canal, right? From transverse abdominis to the pubic tube. So this is the inguinal canal, right? You open the inguinal canal, right? This is the external oblique aponeurosis, right? You see the spermatic cord, right? These are the muscles, right? You see, this is a dissection. You see, this is the superficial inguinal ring, right? You won't appreciate it will be along with the external oblique aponeurosis, right? It will not appear as a ring in the dissection, right? This is superficial inguinal ring. You see, this is the superior crest or middle crest, inferior or lateral crest, and this is the intercrural fibers, right? This is the intercrural fibers. All of this, you can appreciate that. You see, so this is lateral crest, medial crest, and these are the intercrural fibers. All of this transparent layer. You can clearly see the inguinal canal from the superficial inguinal ring, right? And if you, this is the internal oblique, okay? Internal oblique aponeurosis has a lower free end, right? So the superficial, from the superficial inguinal ring, the probe goes into the free end of the internal oblique, right? You can see the passage canal. And again, this is the, if you remove the internal oblique, this is transversus abdominis, right? So from here lies the deep inguinal ring, and here is the superficial inguinal ring. This is the 4 centimeters of inguinal canal. The probe is like this, right? The probe, okay? So this free end of the transverse abdominis and free end of the internal oblique muscles, right? That is, it is called as intermuscular passage, right? So it is, this is the inguinal canal. This is the difference between male and female of the inguinal rings, right? In male, ductus deferens, testicular artery, processus vaginalis, gentle branch of genitofemoral nerve, autonomic nerves, and lymphatics. That is, all of this is spermatic cord. This is the round ligament and lymphatics. Right, ilioinguinal nerve. Coming to the boundaries of the inguinal canal, you have to study the inguinal canal according to its boundaries, the extent, the content, like that. The inguinal canals slant obliquely downwards and medially parallel to and just above the medial part of the inguinal ligament. We have already seen that. And it extends from the deep to the superficial inguinal rings. The length depends on the age of the individual, but in the adults it is between 3 and 6 centimeters long, right? Averagely 4 centimeters. The canal is bounded anteriorly, so the anterior boundary is skin, superficial fascia, and the aponeuris of the external oblique. Laterally, in its lateral third, the anterior wall is reinforced by the muscular fibers of the internal oblique just above their origin from the iliopectineal arch, right? Posteriorly lie the reflected inguinal ligament. You have already known that, you have seen in the previous class. The inguinal ligament reflected onto itself, okay, beyond the lacunar ligament is called as reflected inguinal ligament. And the conjoint tendon, okay, the conjoint tendon is the fascia of the internal oblique and the fascia of the transversus abdominis fused together and forms like a fibrous band. It is called as conjoint tendon, right? And the transversalis fascia, which separate it from extraperitoneal connective tissue and peritoneum. So posteriorly, posterior of the inguinal canal. Superiorly lies the arched fibers of the internal oblique and transverse abdominis, forming the conjoint tendon medially. Inferiorly is the union of the transversalis fascia with the inguinal ligament and the medial end of the lacunar ligament, right? You can see this is the inguinal ligament, right? So the inguinal ligament is forming a triangular ligament here. It is called as lacunar ligament, right? So that is lacunar ligament, and at the same time beyond it, it is not visible in this image. The inguinal ligament reflects like this. That is called as reflected part of inguinal ligament. See, this is the lacunar ligament, the triangular. So here will be the reflected inguinal ligament. And this is the internal oblique. You see, aponeuris is here, right? This is conjoint tendon, right? The aponeuris of the internal oblique and transverse abdominis fuse together in front of the abdomen to form conjoint tendon. You see, so here lies the lacunar ligament reflected part and the conjoint tendon, right? So these are the boundaries. Roof is by internal oblique transverse abdominis. Floor is by, you see, this is the spermatic cord, that is the content of the inguinal canal, right? So floor is by inguinal ligament and spermatic. Roof is by these three muscles, right? You see, in the newborn, the deep and superficial rings are nearly superimposed, right, on the canal. Canal is extremely short. In infants undergoing inguinal hernia repair, the canal is about 1 centimeter long. As a child grows, the anterior abdominal wall muscles develop further, causing the positions of the rings to separate and the canal to lengthen, right? That is the mechanism. The canal becomes progressively more oblique so that by the adulthood, it has a separate anterior and posterior walls, creating a shorter effect, right? Shorter effect. That means it opens and closes. At the superficial ring, the medial end of the anterior wall, where the canal is weakest, right? Inguinal canal is weak at the medial end of the anterior wall. The posterior wall is strengthened by the conjoint tendon and reflected inguinal ligament, right? Increases in intra-abdominal pressure transmitted to the posterior wall of the canal are resisted by the contraction of the three anterolateral abdominal wall muscles, right? So the three anterolateral abdominal wall muscles, that they are external oblique, internal oblique, and transverse abdominis, protect the inguinal canal when there is increased intra-abdominal pressure. The fibers of the internal oblique and transverse abdominis, which form the conjoint tendon, are constantly active in standing. So this conjoint tendon, we already discussed the conjoint tendon. When we discussed it, I have said particularly about if the conjoint tendon is weak, there is every chance for the individual to develop hernia, because the inguinal canal will not be supported or protected, right? So if this conjoint tendon is not active in standing, there is protrusion of contents of the abdomen. This activity increases during episodes of increased intra-abdominal pressure, right? Relations. The inferior epigastric vessels are important medial relations of the deep inguinal ring. They lie on the transversalis fascia as they ascend obliquely behind the conjoint tendon to enter the rectus sheath. The inguinal triangle of Hasselbalch is an important clinical landmark related to the posterior wall of the inguinal canal and is best appreciated by examining inguinal canal region from within the abdomen. The triangle is bounded in. We'll discuss about the Hasselbalch triangle in detail in this class only, right? The triangle is bounded inferiorly by the medial third of the inguinal ligament, medially by the lower lateral border of the rectus abdominis, and laterally by the inferior epigastric vessels. We will see that, right? So this is the inferior epigastric vessels, right? See, this is the conjoint tendon. Conjoint tendon. This is the interfoveolar ligament. This is the canal. Deep inguinal ring. Superficial. Contents of the inguinal canal. Contents are spermatocord in men, round ligament in women. These ducts enter the inguinal canal through deep inguinal ring and exist through the superficial inguinal ring. Additionally, ilioinguinal nerve passes through the part of the inguinal canal. Right? This nerve is a branch of the lumbar plexus, enter the abdominal wall posteriorly by piercing the internal surface of the transverse abdominis muscle, and continues through the layer of the anterior abdominal by piercing the internal oblique muscle. As it continues past inframedially, it enters the inguinal canal. It continues down the canal to exit through the superficial inguinal ring. Spermatic cord. So this is the spermatic cord, spermatic fascia with spermatic cord. You see, this is coming under this is external oblique, right? You see the inguinal canal, right? Coming. This is the inguinal canal, right? And this is spermatic cord. This is the round ligament. Selected part is round ligament. This one, right? This one is round ligament. These are the inferior epigastric artery and veins. See, the round ligament is in the female, right? And this is the ilioinguinal nerve. This is the ilioinguinal nerve, okay? It doesn't part of the inguinal canal only, okay? It traverses part of the inguinal canal only and exit via superficial inguinal ring, but it doesn't come from the deep inguinal ring. It doesn't enter through the deep inguinal ring, right? So those are the contents. Round ligament, ilioinguinal nerve. See that. Spermatic cord begins to form the proximally at the deep inguinal ring. Begins at the deep inguinal ring, consists of structures passing between the abdominopelvic cavities and testes, and the three fascial coverings of enclosed structures. The contents are ductus deferens or vas deferens, the artery to ductus deferens, testicular artery, pampiniform plexus of veins, cremasteric artery and vein, genital branch of genitofemoral nerve, sympathetic and visceral efferent nerve fibers, lymphatics, remnants of the processus vaginalis. We can clearly see this is the contents of the spermatic cord, right? This is the genital branch of genitofemoral nerve. Selected structure is genital branch of genitofemoral nerve, and this one is, you see the artery, that is testicular artery. You see the testicular artery and the genitofemoral nerve, okay, going into this, okay. This is the spermatic fascia, right? In this atlas, it is not given as spermatic cord, but spermatic cord itself is layered by the spermatic fascia. If we remove the spermatic fascia, we can clearly see the pampiniform plexus of veins. You see? So these veins are pampiniform plexus of veins. This nerve is the genitofemoral nerve, okay, genital branch of genitofemoral nerve, and the artery is testicular artery, right? Okay, that is the spermatic cord. These structures enter the deep inguinal ring, proceed down the inguinal canal, and exit from the superficial inguinal ring, having acquired three fascial coverings during the journey. This collection of structures and fascias continue into the scrotum, where the structures connect with the testes and fascias around the testes. These fascia are internal spermatic fascia, which is the deepest layer, arises from the transverse fascia, and it is attached to the margins of the deep inguinal ring. So, internal spermatic fascia is from transverse fascia. And the cremasteric fascia with associated cremasteric muscle. We have already seen that in the previous classes, which is a middle fascial layer arises from the internal oblique muscle. Cremasteric muscle itself is an extension of the internal oblique muscle. Coming to the external spermatic fascia, right? We have already learned about this also, which is the most superficial covering uppermost of the external oblique attached to the margin of the superficial inguinal ring, right? So, internal spermatic fascia is the innermost layer, cremasteric fascia, and the outermost layer is the external spermatic fascia. You see, pampiniform plexus of veins, right, and different structures. You can go through the diagram clearly after the class, as you have already seen that in the 3D atlas. You see, testicular artery, pampiniform plexus of veins, right? These are the coverings. You see, this is the superficial inguinal ring. Outermost layer is external spermatic fascia, and this one is cremasteric fascia, and this one is internal spermatic fascia. Okay. After that, there are vasculature, neurovasculature, right? Genital branch of genitofemoral nerve, testicular artery, and pampiniform plexus of veins, right? And there is ductus deferens also. This is the ductus deferens, right? You see the different coverings, right? Total number is ductus deferens. This is the ductus deferens, right? You see, this is the spermatic cord with its coverings, right? This is the external spermatic fascia, the shiny layer. And here you can see the pampiniform plexus of veins, right? ductus deferens. You see, and internally this is the testicular artery and vein, where this is the deep inguinal ring. Right? From here, the testicular artery is covered by spermatic cord. Right? This is the internal view. You see, this is the superficial inguinal ring, the spermatic cord is coming out. Okay. You see, this is the internal spermatic fascia, right? This one, which is the demonstrator is pulling it, right? Clearly see that. See, and this is the cut end of external oblique aponeurosis. This one is the cut end of external oblique aponeurosis, right? And in the previous slide, we have seen, I'll show you. In the previous slide, you have internal spermatic fascia. This is internal oblique muscle, right? In here, this muscular structure is, this muscular structure in this previous is cremaster muscle. Cremaster muscle and fascia. This is external oblique, right? This is spermatic cord. You can clearly see. See, if you cover the external oblique aponeurosis, right? It will be like this. This is the superficial inguinal ring, right? Inguinal canal, and here will be deep inguinal ring, right? The spermatic cord is coming out of the superficial inguinal ring. And this all of this is external oblique aponeurosis, right? So this aponeurosis continues on the spermatic cord as external spermatic fascia. You see, the shiny layer is from this one. Coming to the round ligament of the uterus is cord-like structure that passes from the uterus to the deep inguinal ring where it enters the inguinal canal. Passes down the inguinal canal and exits through the superficial inguinal ring. At this point, it has changed from cord-like structure to a few strands of tissue with attached to the connective tissue associated with the labia majora. As it travels the inguinal canal, it acquires the same coverings as the spermatic cord in men. As the round ligament exits the superficial inguinal ring, the coverings are indistinguishable from the tissue strands of the ligament itself. The round ligament of the uterus is the long distal part of the original gubernaculum. Remember the previous class, descent of the testes and ovary. In the fetus that extends from the ovary to the labioscrotal swelling. From its attachment to the uterus, the round ligament of the uterus continues to the ovary as the ligament of the ovary that develops from the short proximal end of the gubernaculum. See, this is the round ligament, right? You see, inguinal canal, it is traveling from deep to superficial inguinal ring. You see, and you can clearly see the intercrural fibers here, right? What we mean by intercrural fibers, this is the medial crus, lateral crus, sorry, and medial crus. See, this is the medial crus, this is the lateral crus, and the green one is the intercrural fibers, right? And you can clearly see this. This one is a round ligament, right? Round ligament of the uterus. See. Okay. The inguinal canal is a site of potential weakness in the lower part of the anterior abdominal wall and may provide a herniation of the abdominal viscera. But normally it is prevented by strength and good tone of the muscles of the anterior abdominal wall by the following mechanisms. So there are different mechanisms by which the muscles and the fascia or the different tendons We already seen the interfoveolar ligament, conjoint tendon, a reflected part of inguinal ligament itself, and the three anterolateral muscles of the abdomen. All these things protects the inguinal canal, supports the inguinal canal, so that the content of the abdomen may not protrude through inguinal canal, because the inguinal canal is the weak part in the anterior abdominal wall, right? There is flap wall mechanism. The canal is oblique, hence it is deep, and superficial rings do not lie opposite to each other. As a result, when intra-abdominal pressure is raised, the anterior and posterior walls of the canal are approximated like a flap, so they will close. Guarding. The deep inguinal ring is guarded anteriorly by the internal oblique muscle. The superficial inguinal ring is guarded posteriorly by the conjoint tendon, right? Posteriorly by the conjoint tendon and reflected part of the inguinal canal. The internal oblique surrounds the canal in front, above, and behind, like a flexible mobile arch. Okay, if this is canal, internal oblique is like this. Okay, flexible arch on the inguinal canal, thus forming its anterior wall, roof, and posterior wall. Consequently, when the internal oblique contracts, the roof is pulled and approximated on the floor like a shutter, right? So, if this contracts, internal oblique contracts, what happens? The inguinal ligament, the roof will be with it. Slit wall mechanism. The contraction of the external oblique muscle approximates the two crura, medial and lateral of superficial inguinal rings, like a slit wall. The intercrural fibers also helps in this act. So the crura acts as a slit wall because of the pull of the external oblique upper muscle. Contraction of the cremaster muscle pulls the testis up, and superficial inguinal ring is plugged by the spermatic cord. So that is ball valve mechanism by the cord itself, right? Cremaster muscle lies within the cord, and when this contracts, the testis pulls up, right? And the spermatic cord plugged into the superficial inguinal ring, right? So the shutter mechanism, slit valve mechanism, valve mechanism, like all of these helps in the inguinal canal, right? Integrity of the inguinal canal. In addition to the above mechanisms, the interfoveolar ligament also helps to maintain the integrity of the inguinal canal by strengthening fascia transversalis laterally. The muscle fibers arch down from the lower border of the transverse abdominis to the superior ramus of the pubis and constitute the interfoveolar ligament, the functional medial edge of the deep inguinal ring. You see, this is the interfoveolar ligament, right? So these are the muscles protecting, right? These tendons, conjoint tendon and reflected part of the inguinal ligament, protecting like it. Like this is fascia transversalis, this is external oblique. So all of these are protecting inguinal ring like anything. Like this is the summary. Coming to the Hasselbalch's triangle. The inguinal triangle is situated deep to the posterior wall of the inguinal canal. Hence, it is seen on the inner aspect of the lower part of the anterior abdominal. So, it is not from the anterior aspect, but inner aspect of the anterior abdominal wall, like the iliopubic tract, right? The boundaries are lower 5 centimeters of the lateral border of the rectus abdominis, laterally inferior epigastric artery, and medially medial half of the inguinal ligament. We will see that. You see, this is the rectus abdominis muscle, right? This is the rectus abdominis muscle. This is the inguinal ligament, and this is the inferior epigastric artery, right? So, what is Hasselbalch's triangle is this 5 centimeters, right? Rectus abdominis, 5 centimeters of the inguinal ligament, right? And inferior epigastric artery, right? This is the inferior epigastric artery, right? So this is our Hasselbalch triangle, right? This is not from anteriorly but inner aspect of the actually, right? You see, so this is the Hasselbalch triangle, right? Rectus abdominis, inguinal ligament, and inferior epigastric artery. That is inferior epigastric artery. I will see again. Laterally inferior epigastric artery, medially medial half the inguinal ligament, medially lateral bar of the rectus abdominis muscle, right? That is what Hasselbalch triangle is, right? Right? Okay. The floor of the triangle is covered by the peritoneum, extraperitoneal tissue, and fascia transversalis because this is from the inner aspect. The medial umbilical ligament, obliterated umbilical artery, crosses the triangle and divides it into medial and lateral parts. The medial part of the floor of the triangle is strengthened by the conjoint tendon. The lateral part of the floor of the triangle is weak, hence the direct inguinal hernia usually occurs through this part. So the inguinal hernia occurs through the Hasselbalch triangle. Right? Rectus abdominis, inferior epigastric vessels, and inguinal ligament. See? So this is obliterated umbilical artery, umbilical ligament. So medial half, lateral half, right? You see, this is the inguinal triangle. This is the triangle, right? You see, medial inguinal fossa, right? This one. Coming to the clinical anatomy, we have learned all of this for this thing, hernias, right? Herniation is protrusion of the contents of the abdomen with peritoneum and its sac, and sometimes with the intestines, whatever that is in the abdomen. If the contents of the abdomen protrudes through the anterior abdominal wall, right, it is called as hernia, right? There are different hernias, okay? One is inguinal hernia, which is the most common. All the inguinal canal is arranged such that weakness in the anterior abdominal wall caused by the deep and superficial inguinal links are supported. Although it is supported, the reason is a common site of herniation, particularly in males. An inguinal hernia is the protrusion or passage of a peritoneal sac with or without abdominal content. So whether content is there or not, if there is protrusion of just the peritoneum, it is called as hernia. Through the weakened part of the abdominal wall in the groin. It occurs because peritoneal sac enters the inguinal canal either indirectly or directly. So indirectly is called as indirect inguinal hernia. Directly is called as direct inguinal hernia. So indirectly through the deep inguinal ring. So if the hernia is from deep inguinal ring, it is called as indirect inguinal hernia. Indirect inguinal hernia is the most common of the two types. So this is the most common. Inguinal hernia is much more common in men. Because some part or all of embryonic processes vaginalis, that is, which helps in the descent of the testis, right? Process vaginalis remains open or patent. Patent process vaginalis. It is therefore referred to as congenital in origin. The protruding peritoneal sac enters the inguinal canal by passing through the deep inguinal ring just lateral to the inferior epigastric vessels. You have to remember this. This is very important, right? So the hernia is lateral to the inferior epigastric vessels through the deep inguinal ring is called as indirect inguinal hernia. The extent of its exclusion down the inguinal canal depends on the amount of the process vaginalis that remains patent. So if the entire process vaginalis remains patent, the peritoneal sac may traverse the whole length of the canal, exit the superficial inguinal ring, and continue into the scrotum in men and labia major in women. Right? In this case, the protruding peritoneal sac acquires the same three coverings as those associated with the spermatic cord in men or the round ligament of the uterus in men. So internal spermatic fascia, cremasteric fascia, and external spermatic fascia all lies on the hernia, indirect inguinal hernia. You see, so this is the inferior epigastric vessels, right? So the hernia, this is the hernial direction, deep inguinal hernia, right? Inferior epigastric vessels are lies lateral to the hernia. Okay, this is hernia. Okay, coming through the entire length of the inguinal canal. This is superficial inguinal ring. So all the coverings of the spermatic cord will cover the peritoneal sac, inguinal hernia. In the direct inguinal hernia, peritoneal sac that enters the medial end of the inguinal canal directly through a weakened posterior wall is the direct hernia. So that means the direct inguinal hernia the hernia or peritoneal sac doesn't enter the deep inguinal ring, but abruptly in the middle of the inguinal canal. But it exits through the superficial ring only. It is usually described as acquired because it develops when the abdominal musculature has been weakened and is commonly seen in mature men. Okay, when the abdominal musculature is weak, the bulging occurs medial to the inferior epigastric vessels. That is important. If the peritoneal sac is medial to the inferior epigastric vessels, that is direct inguinal hernia. If this is lateral, that is occurs through the deep inguinal ring. So it should be, or we might say it must be, indirect inguinal hernia. Inferior epigastric vessels in the inguinal triangle, which is bounded by these. We have already seen that. Internally, thickening of the transversalis fascia, iliopubic tract, follows the course of the inguinal ligament. We have already know that. A direct inguinal hernia does not traverse the entire length of the inguinal canal, but may exit through the superficial inguinal ring. When this occurs, the peritoneal sac acquires a layer of external spermatic fascia and can extend like an indirect hernia into the scrotum. Right? You see, these are the inferior epigastric vessels, right? This is medial to the epigastric vessels, whereas inferior epigastric vessels lies lateral to the indirect inguinal hernia. This is direct inguinal hernia, right? You see, this is the conjoint tendon, right? If the conjoint tendon is weak, right, that means the sac will be herniates. You see, this is the direct hernia. You can see the deep inguinal ring, position of the deep inguinal ring. This is the laparoscopic view, right? Hernias occurs in a variety of regions. The commonest site is the groin of the lower anterior abdominal wall because groin is the weakest area in the anterior abdominal wall. In some patients, the inguinal hernias are present from birth, congenital, and are caused by the persistence of the process vaginalis and the passage of the viscera through the inguinal canal. We have already seen that. Acquired hernias occur in older patients and causes include raised intra-abdominal pressure. For example, a repeated coughing associated with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, damage to the nerves of the anterior abdominal wall, example from the surgical abdominal incisions, and weakening of the walls of the inguinal canal because of the old age. All of these helps in herniation. One of the potential problems with hernias is that the bowel and fat may become stuck within the hernial sac. This can cause appreciable pain and bowel obstruction, necessitating the urgent surgery. Okay. Another potential risk is strangulation of hernia, strangulation in which the blood supply of the bowel is cut off at the neck of the hernial sac, rendering the bowel ischemic and susceptible to perforation. Right? This is the summary. Go through the tables. Coming to the femoral hernia. So there is inguinal hernias, and these are two types: indirect inguinal hernia. That hernia is from deep inguinal ring to the superficial inguinal ring. Whereas in the direct inguinal hernia, herniation occurs through the inguinal canal to the superficial inguinal ring. Right? A femoral hernia passes through the femoral canal, right, into the medial aspect of the anterior thigh. Femoral canal is the medialmost portion of the rectus sheath, right? The femoral canal lies at the medial edge of the femoral sheath, which contains the femoral artery, femoral vein, and lymphatics. The neck of the femoral canal is extremely narrow and is prone to trapping bowel within the sac, so masking this type of hernia irreducible and susceptible to bowel strangulation. Right? Femoral hernias are usually acquired and not congenital, and most commonly occur in middle-aged and elderly populations. In addition, because women generally have wider pelvis than men, they tend to occur more commonly in women. So, inguinal hernias in men, femoral hernias in women. But most common type of hernia is inguinal hernia. The pubic tubercle can be a useful landmark when attempting to distinguish an inguinal hernia from femoral hernia. A femoral hernia lies below and lateral to this pubic tubercle, whereas the inguinal hernia is above the pubic tubercle, right? However, the clinical differentiation of groin hernias can be relatively unreliable, prompting the use of imaging in suspected cases, right? But as a general rule, the bulging that appears lateral to the pubic tubercle is below to the tubercle is femoral hernia, whereas if the hernia is above the pubic tubercle, it is inguinal hernia. You see, this is the pubic tubercle, right? See, this is the inguinal hernia. Below is femoral hernia, right? Coming to the another variety, umbilical hernias. They are rare. Occasionally, they are congenital and results from failure of the small bowel to return to the abdominal cavity from the umbilical cord during development. Right? We have already seen umbilical hernias in the previous class of umbilicus. After birth, umbilicus hernias may result from the incomplete closure of the umbilicus. Overall, most of the hernias close in the first year of life, and surgical repair is not generally attempted until later. Incisional hernias occur through a defect in a scar of a previous abdominal operation, right? So if the person is operated for some operation on the anterior abdominal wall, okay, the scar will become a defective area in the anterior abdominal wall musculature. So it is a potential area for hernia. Usually the necks of these hernias are wide and do not therefore strangulate the viscera they contain. The Spigelian hernia passes upward through the arcuate line into the lateral border of the lower part of the posterior rectus sheath. It may appear as a tender mass on the side of the lower anterior abdominal wall. right? So you see, this is the femoral hernia, below the pubic tubercle, inguinal hernia, above the pubic tubercle, right? Spigelline hernia in the arcuate line, incisional hernia, okay, on the previous abdomen, surgery. This is the umbilical hernia. Coming to the sportsman groin. The groin can loosely be defined as the area where the leg meets the trunk near the midline. Here, the abdominal muscles of the trunk blend in with the adductor muscles of the thigh. The medial end of the inguinal ligament attaches to the pubic tubercle. The pubic symphysis attaches to the two pubic bones together, and the superficial inguinal ring occurs. It is also in and around this region where there is considerable translation of force, right? Force during most athletic sporting activities because of the running or triple jump or whatever it may be. If you want, if you have to move in athletics, and the movement includes abdomen wall and lower limbs. So this is the groin is the transitional area between the anterior abdominal wall and lower limbs. So the pain in the groin or pubic region can be due to numerous causes, which include inflammatory changes at the pubic symphysis, insertional problems of the rectus abdominis, adductor longus, and sometimes there may be hernias. So you have to remember that. The key to groin examination, right, is determining the position of the inguinal ligament. The inguinal ligament passes between the anterior superior leg spine and pubic tubercle medially. You already know that. Inguinal hernias are above the inguinal ligament and are usually more apparent on standing. Okay, inguinal hernias are above the inguinal ligament and apparent on standing. A visual assessment of the lump is necessary, bearing in mind the anatomical landmarks of the inguinal ligament. In men, it is wise to examine the scrotum to check for a lump. Okay, because if there is any persistent process vaginalis, it may go up to the scrotum, testis. If an abnormal mass is present, an inability to feel its upper edge suggests that it may originate from the inguinal canal and might be a hernia. Okay. By placing the hand over the lump and asking the patient to cough, the lump bulges outward. This is the physical examination of hernia. You will learn more about this in the third year of the course. An attempt should be made to reduce the swelling by applying gentle, firm pressure on the lump, that is on the hernia. You have to push it into the abdomen. It is called as reducing, right? Reducibility of the hernia. If the lump is reducible, the hand should be withdrawn and careful observation will reveal occurrence of the mass. If the position of an abnormal mass in the groin relative to the pubic tubercle is very important. If the presence of the increased temperature and pain suggests there are signs of strangulation or infection. Right? That is the class today. If you have any doubts, let me know. Right? If you have any doubts, please let me know. Right? That is about inguinal canal and Hasselbalch's triangle.